Well, hello. I just finished editing this interview with Maria Soleil, and I loved how our conversation navigated the reality of nature's impact on so many of us during the challenging times of COVID, how it helped many of us deal with grief and opened us to hear messages that gave us a greater sense of resilience and perhaps pivot us on our life path. We talked about the archetype of water, and I loved how the water element wove itself throughout this interview, from sailing to snow to the ocean beach. So I really think you'll love this talk with Maria's beautiful, soft presence. Enjoy. So, welcome everybody. Today we have with us Maria Soleil, and let me tell you a little bit about Maria. She's a marketing consultant and director of Soleil Marketing based in the UK. Her work spans sustainability, social impact, renewable energy, and more. She believes marketing can be a powerful force for good, and her own time in nature has deepened her passion for protecting the natural world. So, welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Maureen. It's great to be here.
And as many of my more recent guests, you and I met through LinkedIn.
Yes.
Which is a wonderful place. It's really a wonderful place to connect with like-minded people in a kind of a business environment. So I so appreciate you stepping up to agree to be interviewed on my podcast today. I feel so grateful for this network that I'm creating of wonderful, beautiful, heart-centered people who are all over the world. And so appreciate your participation in this.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Really.
So I always ask my guests, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood as it relates to nature?
Yeah. So when I think of my childhood, I've never really sort of considered that I was a child that spent much time in nature. However, that's actually not true because I grew up with kind of in a sailing family. But I think because it was such a sort of a core part of, every weekend in the summer we would go sailing, I kind of forget that is actually connecting with nature, and obviously very much so with sailing and connecting with the wind and reading the weather and being on the water. So for me, I suppose I did spend a lot of time as a child on water and near water. But not so much, I would say, in kind of green spaces. But I have always felt a connection, certainly. Yeah.
I was just going to say, isn't that interesting? It is kind of, we gravitate toward thinking of nature as trees and woodlands, but it's every part of nature. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, it's funny because as you asked that question, I thought my immediate thought was actually not really, and then I realised no, I did. It just wasn't in that kind of in that sort of natural fields and greenery and trees. It was more related to being connected with water and the wind and the weather.
Great. Oh, that sounds like a beautiful childhood. So this is off the coast of England in some way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, in the southeast of the UK. So I grew up in Kent. So if everyone knows the River Thames in London. And there's a river that's not too far away called the River Medway, which is where my family would sail, and my granddad had a boat that we sailed, kind of during the spring and summer months. And we also maybe kind of once every couple of years, we'd go on like a sailing holiday to places like Greece and Turkey. I think we went to once. So the weather in the UK didn't used to be particularly sunny and warm, but obviously going to those kind of Mediterranean countries, you're getting a bit of the warmth that you don't get in the UK. Although that's changing now, I think, with I guess climate change.
2 questions. I just realized that I did not address your last name. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because actually, in the last kind of month or so, I've been doing a lot of research into my family name, Soleil. So that surname does actually go back. I've traced it back to the 18th century, in Belgium. So my family is originally from southern Belgium, sorry, and it means sun in French, and it's quite an unusual surname. But the story I heard from I guess my parents and grandparents was no one seemed to ever really know where it came from. I think there was an assumption that it was maybe made up along the way because it's such an unusual name, and it means sun, so it's such a lovely surname to have. But I decided to kind of challenge that myth and do my own research, and I actually delved into I went into kind of French records, and then I didn't find anything because actually, yeah, like I say, my ancestors were from Belgium. So that was a really fascinating kind of journey. And yeah, I'm 35 and I've only just learnt the actual truth of where my surname comes from.
So you traced it back to Soleil's in the 18th
Yeah, yeah.
century.
Yeah, so I think 1790 something was when I traced back like a great, great, great grandfather to.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. And I don't know how often back in the 1700s did people change their names, but I can imagine you meet people now that think that you created that name just because of what you do. I mean, your work, although you're marketing,
Yeah,
as my background is
yeah.
marketing as well. I spent 25 years in marketing, but your focus is on uh, sustainability
Mm,
and protecting the natural world, and whatever way you can, you bring your skills to help people who have work in those areas, which is really lovely. But yeah, I love to look at people's last name in relation to what they do. It
mm,
there's often a resonance, I feel, between people who are following their life path, something that they really are passionate about and love. Uh, so anyhow, I appreciate
mm,
that little digression. But you were talking about your childhood sailing and learning to kind of read the weather patterns. Can you just share a little bit about that? Because I think so many of us, myself included, I mean, I'm fascinated by the sky. I have always look up to the clouds and look at the colors and the shapes of the clouds and kind of hope to predict. And if I didn't go into marketing, I might have gone into meteorology. So
mm.
I would just love to kind of hear how you learned, or anything you learned about the weather patterns.
Well, what a great question. This is something like when I think back to my childhood, it does make me feel a bit sad because I think as a kid, I loved going out on the water. Like I loved spending, like we would go for like, Saturday to Sunday, we'd spend the weekend, or Friday to Sunday sometimes if the tide was right. That's the thing. Sailing's always dictated by, weather and tides. You really have to follow nature. You can't control. I mean, that's the whole thing about sailing. You really can't control it. Um, and I feel sad because I didn't take as much of the opportunity as I should have or I could have, to learn properly how to sail. My mum learned as she grew up, so she's like a sailor, and my granddad was really the first person, I guess, to kind of bring the hobby into the family. So as it was very much a family thing, and I think that as a kid, I might have picked up little things here and there, but I've generally spent most of my time just like sitting on the bow of the boat, and like my feet would touch. I'd try and like get my feet to touch the water as the boat kind of went through the water. That was probably one of my favorite things to do. But I really admired like my granddad and my mum. I think my mum, she does also have the ability to kind of look at the clouds, understand what type of clouds they are, see where the wind's coming from. Even just, she talks about being able to feel on her face the wind direction, and like just things like that. And it kind of sounds simple, but when you actually try and do it, I personally find it quite difficult, and I still try now. Like, well, where's which wind direction? Just by the feel of the wind on your skin, it's really fascinating. But yeah. So that's what I would say, really. That for me, I do look back with a bit of sadness that I didn't take more of an opportunity to kind of build that knowledge. But what stays with me is just the feeling that I had, and like the joy that I had as a kid. And my brother as well. He was also there a lot of the time, or most of the time. Just the joy of sharing that time, like in nature, disconnecting from real life technology. But it's interesting. It's just something that I think maybe I look back and I can appreciate it more as an adult, but in a way where I think, I wish that, well, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as a kid, as a kid would. And maybe sailing wasn't something that I wanted to pick up when I was a kid, which is fine. But I think that's probably where the root of my kind of connection that I have with nature comes from. But without knowing, unknowingly, it's almost an unconscious thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So often those connections that we have, if we're lucky enough to have those experiences as a child, we take them for granted. It's
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
there. And it's not until we're older and then we can see that not everybody had a childhood like ours. And, some people have never been on a sailboat. So they're like, oh,
Mm.
wow, that would be really cool. Or, some families, would go hiking in the forest and, backpack. And there's many people who've never done that. So, yeah, if we look back, we can just really appreciate when we're older that those experiences that our that parents have given us. So that's really lovely. So I understand you have kind of an arc of a story to share. I'll let you begin that.
Yeah, thank you. So the story does relate to my granddad. So as I mentioned, my granddad, we would spend a lot of time with our grandparents growing up. So my granddad and grandma were really like important to me and really special. We had really special relationships with them, me and my brother. And as everyone really struggled, I think, in one way or another during COVID. And in 2020 was, for me, like a really pivotal year in many ways. So, and I guess has set me on this path to meet and speak with you now, Maureen. So in 2020, so I was working in travel marketing. I was actually working for a yacht charter company, which is, kind of relevant to my childhood. Yeah. I hadn't always worked in that industry. I'd kind of bounced around different industries, and I never really felt like I connected with my work. And I really kind of felt like it was purposeful. And then this job came up to work in yacht charter marketing, which is a very niche part of the travel industry, like very, very niche. I basically got to spend, I'd get, okay, it was high pressured because we always had to get bookings, but I got to spend a lot of time kind of reading about, luxury destinations and the Mediterranean and finding photos and doing all the kind of marketing and promotional stuff for the company. So I really loved it. But unfortunately, it's unsurprising, for your viewers to hear that I was made redundant from that quite quickly in 2020 due to COVID. Because, the company was not making any money. And I had a few months where I just really didn't know what to do. I was trying to figure out what my kind of next step would be. Would I get another job in marketing? Would I possibly try self-employment? And I had settled on, I thought, well, if there's any time to try going self-employed, it's probably now when everyone's working from home, and I couldn't really see many good jobs available at that time anyway. So that took me down that path, and that's when I started my own business, selling marketing, which I'm still running to this day. And unfortunately, another thing that happened during that time was that me and my fiance's wedding was postponed. So we couldn't get married we could have got married, but we couldn't get married in the same way that we wanted to, the way we had planned with our family and friends, and not worrying about COVID. So we postponed that by 2 years. And then the next thing to happen after that was that, unfortunately, my granddad had to go into hospital for something unrelated, but he ended up getting COVID and he passed away in hospital. And it was a really difficult time, as obviously many, many families experienced, because we couldn't. It was basically a two-week period, I think. He went in for an unrelated thing, and then 2 weeks later he passed away, and we couldn't go to see him that whole time. And as a family, obviously that's really hard to deal with when we couldn't even see one another to kind of help one another get through that. We had everything was over the phone. And it was really that period of time. So that was kind of November 2020. I was just really, really struggling. I was trying to start this, kind of get my business off the ground, trying to navigate kind of rearranging wedding and everything, and not knowing sort of, if the new date, sort of kept pushing the date back for that. And then kind of just managing the grief was really difficult at that time. And obviously, well, speaking, in the UK, the government kind of allowed us to go out for a walk each day. I think it was an hour or so. I can't remember exactly, but you were allowed to leave the house to go for a walk, basically. And so I really took advantage of that. For me, that was my escape. That was my time to just try and disconnect from everything that was going on in my head. And I remember I think a couple of months, 2 to 3 months after, so sort of January, February the next year, we had about a week of snow, which is actually quite unusual for where I live in Kent. It's generally like the hottest part of the UK. And so snow is kind of a fun experience, but it's always a little bit interesting because we can't cope with it. Like, our roads can't cope, our cars can't cope. So in a way, everything always shuts down. It was already shut down to an extent anyway due to COVID, but it's just it really stands out in my memory as a particular time where, a particular day. I think it was the 3-month anniversary of my granddad's passing. And I was walking through this sort of small forest not far from my house at the time. And the trees just looked absolutely beautiful, as they always do, generally anyway, but covered in snow. It's like it's another kind of place for me that I'm always in awe, really, of what the landscape looks like in snow. And then I just remember walking down this path, and I just felt overcome, I guess, by the beauty of the space I was in, and the emotions that I was feeling and what I was trying to process. And I wrote this poem to my granddad, and it really felt like a landmark and kind of a milestone for me that I sort of had to pass through to get to the next sort of stage, I guess, of grief and kind of moving on with things. And I really just felt that environment and that landscape and the trees and the stillness that I felt at the time it just really made me feel this comfort and calmness, and it allowed me to kind of vocalize what I was feeling in the form of a poem. And it still sticks with me, actually, when I think about that experience as quite, like I say, just a very sort of pivotal time, and it sort of marked almost the next stage in the journey of just what had been a really difficult 9 months, I suppose 9 months, almost a year at that point. And I felt very held, very, very emotional. I'm an emotional person anyway, but I felt very held by something that isn't a human or a physical, human being. And the power that can come from that experience is just, it's still, like I say, I still have kind of times like that. Not so often, but that for me was just, I'd never felt like that before. And it was really, really powerful to me.
Wow.
Mm.
There's these moments that we have. I am, they're hard to put words to it because they are we feel them within our bodies. We feel them within our heart. And to put, wrap them in a mental framework it almost feels like it's betraying the experience in a way. There's something, it is so ephemeral, I feel. And that experience of walking in the snow, I know that, we get snow here on Long Island in New York, and I just love going out when we have it. And we don't have it every year now. I mean, sometimes we just get flurries, which is really sad. But the snow actually muffles the sound. So it's quiet, like you said. It's like you're in this almost like a cocoon. Even though you're outside, there's a different quality of the air and the sound. Everything is different.
Mm.
And it is almost like we're held in the softness, in the yin, in the feminine.
Yeah,
Wow.
I completely agree. And as you say, I do find it very difficult to put into words. And I think generally for me, it's funny as I talk to you, there's other examples that are coming to mind where I'm realizing that the way I almost process something or move through to the next stage of my path is often through being in nature and words and connecting the two together. So I had another experience, funny enough, that year. Actually, it wasn't that. It was only a few months after, in Brighton, in the south of the UK. And it was one of the first times I decided to take myself away for a couple of days because I thought, well, I'm self-employed. I work remotely. I can just, I can work wherever. So I wanted to do it. And I had this moment where I went for an early morning walk, and I finished the walk at like Brighton Beach, so I could see the pier sort of to my right. And again, I was overcome with emotion because I think it was maybe it was a very strange thing. And again, I'm trying to struggle to put into words. I just remember sitting down and just thinking, wow, what a year. It was a year, I suppose, at that point. I think it was April 2021. So it's all, COVID started in March 2020. And it was probably the first time I properly sat down and recognized what I had been through, but also the fact that I had, during that time, decided to go self-employed and start my own business. And I'd sort of been sort of successful at the goals that I'd set for myself, I'd achieved. And I almost thought, wow, what a contrast between the struggles that I had and then the positive story of starting that new path and being successful on it. Taking myself to Brighton just because I could, working from there. And it was such a beautiful morning as well, because I remember it's like sort of mid-April, I think, and it was a clear, sunny day. And it wasn't too cold. It wasn't like hot and it wasn't cold. The temperature was almost just perfect. And it was again like I had been invited to join nature in that moment, to just reflect on, to reflect and to, I suppose to feel kind of embraced by the stillness. But it wasn't completely still. There were seagulls and there were people, but it was something about the way I was feeling and the way the weather was that day, the way the air felt. Like you say, it was kind of a little bit of wind, but I think it was generally quite calm. And as I look back now, I'm thinking it's funny. I had several of these experiences that kind of took me through something that it kind of helped me move from something that had been difficult or challenging and then on to the next phase. Very, very different, a pebbly beach with the water lapping onto the beach in Brighton, which is obviously quite buzzy and a great place to be. And then the previous kind of experience was near my house, and it was very quiet. It's just like snow, winter. Yeah, winter, and then spring was the next kind of experience that I had.
Yeah, and it's all nature.
And water, and next to water, which is I would say, is probably where I reach some of those deeper emotions, maybe, or again, it must be a connection with childhood. I think it just somehow takes me back.
Yeah, but also water is associated with emotion.
Mm, mm,
You know, in the Western view of the elements, water is, like the tarot cards of water embody emotion, the more feminine, intuitive abilities, and connects us to a deeper level of experience than we're typically
mm.
living in our everyday lives. So it makes sense that water connected you. I mean, even the snow is water.
It's very true, isn't it? Very true. And yeah,
Mm.
obviously, everything is alive because of water. And it's funny because I'm a Pisces, and when I'm kind of, I always think I am a Pisces through and through. I really connect with that, and it's obviously a water sign. Again, emotions, like you say, that is very much me. And the thing that I always love to think about is, I think it's something that Bruce Lee said about um, flowing, like being able to flow like water. Like water can crash, but it can also be soft. It takes whatever shape it needs to take, basically, to get to where it needs to get to. And I always sort of think of that when I think about struggles in life, and how you could be, you can be strong when you need to, you can be soft when you need to. Um, and I just think it's a fantastic analogy. But yeah, I really fully I feel that feminine energy, that emotional connection. And I love being in water as well. I think most people, I don't really know I don't think I know anyone that doesn't enjoy being in water. I think it's a universal kind of like benefit and well-being it kind of brings to us.
Yeah, I think perhaps it, people have said that it goes back to us being in the amniotic fluid in the womb. That watery environment is what
Comforting,
we
yeah.
developed in, and that gave us that comfort. And there's been many people on this podcast that have shared experiences in childhood of going into lakes and rivers and feeling that sense of being embraced, cleansed, renewed, refreshed, in an emotional, mental, and spiritual and physical way. Water has that ability, and I love the research that's going on about water is actually a medium for consciousness, because water
Mm,
flows through everything. And quantum physics is now talking about consciousness being the foundation or the underlayer of everything in the universe. Excuse me.
mm,
So, not to get all heady, but I'm just fascinated by things like that. How consciousness, water. Oftentimes, when we're experiencing water, we can receive an intuitive flow of ideas and messages, and connecting to our real inner selves. I know that, I often take a shower, and all of a sudden it will be like, oh, great idea.
yes,
It just drops into my head.
yeah. I have that
So
as
it
well.
makes,
Yeah. Mm.
and when we even put ourselves in the water, really, can be very magical. Wow. So it sounds like, you were invited maybe subconsciously to go out for that walk into the winter wonderland so that you can move through this or start the beginning of this process of releasing some grief. And then you were drawn to the ocean front uh, to have another awakening and awareness of your life path. And I'm curious, when you started your business, did you start it with the idea of working with individuals and organizations that are involved in sustainability and nature
Yeah,
conservation type?
I did sort of intentionally, because one thing I said was that I never wanted to. Well, one thing I did say actually when I was sort of deciding what to do, when I felt really lost, was that I never wanted to work in marketing. That was like the thing I said. I was like, I want to do something else. So I did like a short course in sort of to help navigate kind of career change. And what that showed me was that it wasn't really that I wanted to just abandon marketing. It was that I wanted to do purposeful work, more purposeful work, um, that wasn't really just around kind of growing, you know, sales, year after year for maybe businesses that didn't really seem like they were doing kind of meaningful things. And when I say meaningful, I mean kind of solving you know, problems of people and planet. So that's what when I talk about purpose driven, I think of businesses that are solving kind of a social or an environmental problem. So one example is, we need to transition to renewable energy. So instead of working for a fossil fuel client, I want to work for a renewable energy client. So that's the kind of choice that I've made in the work that I do. And um, that was a conscious decision, but following that sort of training, course that I went through, it showed me that I'm good at marketing and I do enjoy marketing, but it's just that I want to do it in a more purposeful and rewarding way for particular types of clients. So then I kind of discovered the whole B Corp movement, which since 2021 has grown like massively. I think the UK has got the most B Corps in the world, which is brilliant. It shows the appetite for businesses to want to do more than just make money. And that kind of took me down that path. And then I sort of looked into B Corp certification for my own business, and I learned that any business of any size can become B Corp certified. And for me, going through that process was just about really sort of showing a public commitment that I was doing something above and beyond, any kind of business as usual approach. Because it's something I feel passionate about. I do feel like every business should, have their responsibility to not only, do positive work to help people on planet, but to recognize that if a business exists, it will be extracting from the planet and from people in some way. That's, if you've only got to look at the history of kind of the Companies Act in the UK, and where the Companies Act comes from. It comes from the East, or it's related to, I'd have to check the facts on this, but I believe the East India Company, or kind of one of the first companies to kind of all be about just generating profit for shareholders and not considering the impacts of their business on kind of local people and their well-being and things like that. So it's clear, we are facing some really big challenges around the world, and I just feel like if we have the tools and the means and the knowledge to kind of make a difference, we should. And those are the types of people that I love working with, and the work that I, through marketing, it's all about helping those types of businesses and organizations grow. And that's just the work that I want to, that's the value that I want to kind of provide, and that's the work that I do.
Yeah. That's really wonderful. I applaud you because, you're bringing your gifts to the world through your I mean, you're using, or you're following your values and your ethics with integrity to bring your gifts out into the world. And I think the more of us that do that in whatever work we do, that is where I think people are starting to really move toward. And it's not like you said, it's not like you have to abandon marketing and become a Reiki
Mm.
master or a yoga instructor to feel like you're making a difference in the world. We're all making our difference in the world when we're in our passion, when we're really following and listening to our values, and with integrity. And that is just, that's beautiful. Very
Thank you.
beautiful.
And I do just want to add, though, I do always try and recognize and acknowledge that not everyone is able to do that. Like, people are in certain situations, that they may be from kind of different backgrounds and things, that means that they may want to do work that's more purposeful, but they, for whatever reason, they can't. And it's something that they're trying to strive towards, but they're kind of being limited by their circumstances. And like, that's fine. Like, not everyone can kind of pivot to doing that type of work. So I don't think that's, I just think there is, even in life, there are kind of small ways you can kind of make an impact, whether it's in your local community, it could be through your work, be through your job. It even could just be kind of supporting your family members in some way. I just think that I do feel that the more as individuals we can do, like, that's only going to lead to better outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, so well said. Yes, absolutely. And I think if whatever our passions are and where we find our joy, the more we can do of that, the more we dwell in that space, the better off we are. Yeah. So I'm just curious. I'm just going to ask this question. I do ask it to some of my guests is, do you think we all have these stories of profoundly moving experiences in nature?
What a great question. I think I would say yes, but it might be that a lot of people haven't become aware of them yet for themselves, or they're not conscious of that. For me, as I said, like, I am quite an emotional person. I'm very in tune with my feelings, sometimes maybe too much. But for me, that's almost like the medium that I guess I use. It's like, if I need a breakthrough, or like you say with the shower, I know if I go for a walk and I just either leave, I'm not brave enough to leave my phone behind. I'm not, I wish I could leave my phone behind, but if I don't look at my phone and I go for a walk in nature and I'm undisturbed, I generally always have a breakthrough, a big or a small breakthrough in something that I'm struggling with, or I tend to get loads of ideas. So that I know a lot of people that work in sort of creative jobs where they will actually go and they know, right, I need to come up with some ideas. I'm just going to go out for a walk, not going to take my phone, not going to listen to a podcast. So for them, like, that almost could be their kind of their deep connection that they're getting and their experience that they're getting. For me, mine is sort of very closely connected to, I guess, grief is really what started it. And to this day, I feel sort of a sense of comfort, really. It's like, if I'm struggling with something, I know I can just go out. And I do question, though, if this is like, if this is nature helping me? Am I connecting more with nature, or is nature helping me just to connect more to myself? And that's the question I don't know if I'll ever know the answer to when I have those experiences. So yeah, for me, that's kind of how I feel. But I definitely think other people, knowingly or unknowingly, will have had those experiences to a smaller or bigger extent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I do agree with that as well. And like you said, it's not everyone recognizes it as a deeply profound experience because they may not take the time to reflect on it or kind of recognize it as such. But I think one of the goals of this podcast is to get people to think more about it. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, so those watching and listening are already on board, but um, one of these segments may reach some people that, they don't think that they had a deep experiences, but my hope is that one of these conversations, something said, will trigger something within them that says, oh, wait a minute, there was that very strange experience, odd experience, and I just kind of brushed it aside as a coincidence, or that didn't really happen the way I thought I experienced it. And I hope it will inspire them to reflect a little bit on that, because I think there is magic. There is magic all around us all the time. We just have
Oh,
to.
for sure. We just need to notice it and connect. And I just think our minds are so busy and so overwhelmed with information, like bombarded every day. And we're really busy. We have so much, really long to-do lists. We're overwhelmed. And it's just about, I think, trying to quieten that noise. And like, again, I think it is, I would say, a privilege to be able to take the time to go out and even be near nature. But I also think there are ways you can bring it in. You don't necessarily have to, go out and take a long walk every day. One of the most powerful things that I learned, I did a nature connection, there's nature connection facilitation course. So it was helping people, it was learning how to help other people connect to nature. So again, this experience kind of came later on. This was a couple of years ago. I'd never done facilitation before. I'd never really done anything quite like it. We had to spend like 3 days camping, and we're outside, basically all the time. And it was just, a lot of people on that course were like worked in kind of counseling or psychotherapy or social work. And I was the only person from like a kind of commercially, from marketing. I was like, and I felt like I felt a bit out of place, but then I realized we were all there connected through the same thing, which was we know how powerful it was for us. And it was about learning how to help other people have those connections. And it was very much around, the 5 senses and taking people through those senses when they're outside. And we had to spend one night, the last night we had to spend out sleeping on our own. So like it was sort of 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. We had to be out on our own, sleeping in nature. And it was, the sort of rules were you can't be in a tent and you can't talk to anyone else. It has to be like a full, solo thing, silent thing. I wasn't brave enough to actually sleep outside. I just felt I felt a little bit uncomfortable. I wasn't quite ready for it. I also had a long drive the next day, so I didn't want to, I was like, I need to get some sleep. So what I did, I chickened out a little bit, and I just decided to kind of stay up until the sun went down. So this was, so I stayed out for a few hours and I sat under an oak tree. I was drawn to this oak tree. It was just the most beautiful oak tree. And there was a field of sheep that I was kind of looking at. And I think I spent sort of 3 to 4 hours. And it would have been dark by that point, but probably about 3 hours until it properly got dark. And I just sat there and, contemplating. It was really, really difficult, obviously, because your mind's just, just to sit there and not think of anything or try to kind of bring your presence back. But again, that was a really profound experience because I didn't want to leave. Like I was like, oh, I do want to kind of go back to my tent and sleep, but I just felt like I just didn't want to leave the beauty that I was part of.
So you chickened out, and
Well, I made peace with it at the time because I thought, It was a completely safe space. Like they said, if you don't feel comfortable with it, just do a few hours. Um, and I actually heard a story from one of the other people in the course. She really found it very difficult because she felt really scared. She said, trying to lie that she was in a bivy bag. Use that terminology in the US? Bivy bag? Do you know what a bivy bag is?
Sleeping bag?
It's like a sleeping bag, but it's like an outdoor sleeping bag. So it's like a waterproof sleeping bag, basically. So you can literally just go out, sleep underneath the stars, no tent, no canopy, and that's it. But this lady was saying she just had a really difficult experience because she acknowledged that it's very, very, it makes you feel very vulnerable when you're out there. It's basically pitch black and you just hear all of these noises, twigs breaking, just thinking, what is that? Is that a fox? Is it a badger? And the animals are just going about their business and you're just lying there trying to sleep. And this is one of the reasons why I decided not to actually try and sleep, because I thought I just won't get any sleep. But that's also, I think, important to acknowledge that it can be a vulnerable space for a lot of people. And obviously nighttime is kind of a different story a lot of the time. But yeah, I just think even just try and take a few minutes, 5 minutes each day to somehow take that time and have a really small experience. Just don't look at your phone for 5 minutes. I think I actually hate technology. I work in marketing, and this is the thing. I have to take my space away because for me, I just find it overwhelming, like social media. So that's really important as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of this paraphrasing of a quote from Richard Louv, who wrote the book The Last Child in the Woods. And he basically said technology isn't bad, obviously. There's a lot of good that we get from technology. But the more technology we're involved with, the more nature we need to restore balance in our lives. So it's really just the imbalance that's bad. And it just brings me back to my my work with feng shui. Yin and yang are not, neither one is bad, negative. It's imbalance of them that is negative or detrimental to us and our health.
And there wouldn't be a
Yeah.
yin without a yang, and there wouldn't be a yang without a yin. They need one another to almost survive, I suppose. And I think I totally agree. I think it's just the balance is completely off for most people. Most people in kind of Western kind of digital societies, and I do think it's why we suffer. We have like really high stress levels and mental health, problems are kind of increasing. And I think it's a lot to do with our disconnection from the natural world and spending time in it.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, Maria, do you have any last words to share?
Yeah, I would love it if anyone listening to this podcast is just inspired to just take some time for themselves out in nature, whether it's, like I say, 5 minutes here or there, or on the other end of the spectrum, taking yourself for kind of a long hike or maybe a couple of days. That's one thing I meant to talk about, but I actually kind of forgot was I took a solo hike over a few days last summer. And for me, again, that was such a profound, amazing experience and as an experience that I don't think I could get any other way. So whether you're able to do that or whether you just have really limited time, just try and get outside or try and almost build that, cultivate that kind of natural nature within your home. So whether it's kind of a hanging plant or, I don't know, just a view out of a window, maybe you can work from, just to kind of bring that in some ways. I just think it's so important. And I think it really helps us connect to our own kind of intuition and to maintain our own well-being, which I think at the moment in particular is really, really important to do.
Yeah, and I always like to say, look up. The sky is nature, and appreciating the clouds. There's a group called the Cloud Appreciation Society.
Oh, I should join that.
It's British based too.
Okay.
I found it on YouTube and I was like, oh my God, you can become a member. We all have access to the sky during the day. Unfortunately, our night skies are very much clouded over with night pollution, light pollution, I meant to say. But if we do have opportunities to get out into clear skies, wow, tapping into that. I mean, and noticing the phases of the moon and where the moon is. I mean, there's so much we can do no matter where we are. So thank you, Maria, for sharing this. It's been such a pleasure connecting with you. I'm excited to see how you will help influence this world going forward. And I invite all of you who are watching and listening to please comment. We will respond to your comments. Like and share. I really appreciate your tuning in today. So have a wonderful day. Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.